Win It podcast. I'm Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. With me is Russell Clay at Russell J. Clay, breaking down tonight's 11-game NBA slates, and it's another monster one with another tons of high total games, and it's going to be a high-scoring night. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you have to decide relatively early where you're going with your funds tonight. If you're just going to stick to cash, or you're going to try to hit those high variance tournament lineups.
Yeah, because, if you're looking tonight, it's 11 games. You're looking 3 games with 220 or over. That's scary already. You're talking about some pretty good exposure to those 3 games, and you can do a lot with all the value in high scoring games that are, in other spots tonight. So,
right. This is going to be one of those nights where you don't want to be one of those people leading the GPPs at like 7:30 or 8 because a lot of these games that start 8 or later on the West Coast, those are the ones that you really want to target. So don't be that guy trying to get out ahead of everyone early.
Yeah, no stacking like 76ers and Hornets and hoping that holds because, as you mentioned, we looked at Houston, New Orleans. That's an 8 o'clock game. It's 220. Minnesota, Washington, 220. Clippers and OKC, 221. And then there's some other games that are really intriguing. And I think I'm a little bit surprised with Portland, Boston. It is 217. I'm curious to see how the backcourts match up against each other. One of the best backcourt defenses against one of the best front court or backcourt offenses. So it's interesting.
Right, and one of the general rules we've kind of been following for a while is not playing opposing guards against Boston, and that has actually kind of worked out pretty well for quite a stretch here. So they just have really good defensive guards. So it'll be interesting. I think Lillard will be fine. Probably going to be tough for him to hit value, but McCollum's the one that we were talking about might have some trouble. Even with the minutes with the starters off the court.
Yeah, you just look at the guys like Avery Bradley and Marcus Smart going up against them. I wouldn't put it past this team to score 106 points tonight, but I'm also I'm having a hard time to see where that comes from. But I know Boston plays fast-paced at home. It should pick things up, but there's just better guys and better matchups at that price point that I'll be looking at.
Definitely.
Memphis, Sacramento, 214. Orlando and Chicago, 213. Those are the other 2 games. Also, Denver, Los Angeles, 211. So those 3 games are great spots to kind of mix and match if you want to pay up for some guys there. I don't mind it, but also kind of a great spot for value plays.
Yeah, that Lakers-Nuggets game is definitely an intriguing one. I think there's a lot of solid value pretty much all over the place with some of the key pieces out for Denver or potentially out for Denver, and then the sort of the new wave of Lakers sort of point guard, shooting guard situation.
Yeah, and if Kobe sits tonight, they're in much better spots than where they would be if Kobe does come back and play, just because he takes 15 to 20 shots away from that backcourt. So that's a little troublesome, but still very solid plays for the price. Moving over to shooting guard tonight, and injuries-wise, not a ton. There's really Rondo. He made that miraculous comeback, you could say, coming in and playing while everyone played Darren Collison the other night. He's probable tonight. Michael Carter-Williams is questionable. You would see more Jared Bayless a little bit. You think you would see more OJ Mayo, but that hasn't always been the case. Bayless would be the one to step in and play, but not on my radar against the backcourt of Indy.
No, and again, he's sort of intriguing, but when you look at this slate, you're going to need some really high upside. So, if things work out, maybe in a cash game, but probably most likely staying away.
Yeah, the Indy-Milwaukee game's appealing on some aspects, but in comparison to the rest of the other 10 games, not so much. Looking at the top price options, there's a lot of big names tonight: Westbrook, Paul, and Wall, and we're talking DraftKings is kind of an easy choice to fade Westbrook at 11K.
Yeah, the price difference from FanDuel to DraftKings is a little bit different, but I think in general tonight, I kind of like a lot of the higher priced options over Westbrook. And I really like this matchup John Wall has in terms of just pace and matchup and Vegas. So Westbrook's clearly always the type of guy who can go for 60 fantasy points, but with his salary the way it is, that's really not enough right now.
Yeah, if he's on, we're talking about FanDuel. It's Westbrook's still 11K, but also Paul and Wall are both over 10,000. So that's not the case on DK, and I think where value's a little bit easier to pair up on FanDuel, Westbrook's not a bad option, but he is against Paul in a tougher matchup. But with a 221 total, I mean Westbrook's plays a triple-double threat night in and night out. So I just think Wall at his pricing, it's Minnesota and an equally high total. It's just an easier call for me.
Right. Yeah, definitely a little safer, I would say.
Yeah, and the same goes for Paul. I mean, the Thunder have struggled against point guards, and Paul is the usage monster for LA right now.
Right.
But, looking a little bit cheaper, we're kind of passing on Damian Lillard and Lowry. As good as they've been, just two tougher matchups that I'm not really inclined with paying their price, especially with Wall 200 more.
Right. With the Wall Lillard thing, it's kind of like they're pretty close in price. I mean, they're a little more spaced out on FanDuel, but I just like Wall a lot more tonight. And then, I mean, I just don't think Lowry has the type of game tonight that sort of helps him out against a player like Wall as well.
Yeah, I mean, Lowry's always a safe bet for 35 to 40 fantasy points night in, night out, but I don't see the upside against this Utah team that you're clearly going to need tonight. Looking a little bit cheaper, I still like Drew Holiday coming off the bench, 30 to 32 minutes night in, night out. 35 to 40 fantasy points is what you're going to get. But he was a GPP play in the past because of his kind of high upside. Not really the case anymore. I think he's just more the guy who can get you 25 and maybe a few steals.
Yeah, no, solid play, solid price. But tonight I'm more looking for a little higher upside there in a tournament. But again, solid in cash.
Yeah, I mean, with his price tag in comparison to the guys lower, and that kind of goes to the same for Conley and Rose. Yeah. Solid cash game plays tonight. Rose might have the higher upside just because his usage rate's a little higher than Conley's. But, I mean, really three stellar matchups for all three. But I like aiming just a little bit lower in price and maybe getting a similar upside for guys like Rubio, Clarkson, and Russell.
Yeah, and on both sites, Isaiah Thomas is pretty much in the same price range, and he's someone I'm kind of looking at as I'm not sure if it's contrarian, but I'm not sure he's going to be very high owned because of the past few games and sort of the perceived bad matchup there. But I think that's an interesting play for that guy in sort of a Vegas likes that game type of way.
Yeah, I mean, home total of 111 there. Thomas is definitely a high usage guy there. And Boston's put up some pretty spread out, box scores over the recent weeks. I mean, Thomas definitely does have that upside. And his prices come down, which I've liked over the last week or two here.
Mm-hmm.
But touch on the Lakers guards. I do think if Kobe comes back, I still think Russell is my favorite, my preferred out of the Clarkson-Russell duo.
Yeah, I think you have to go with Russell. Just has more upside right now, and I think he's sort of proving to Byron Scott that he can play, which shouldn't be a thing, but it actually has been this year. So him sort of breaking out this past week or two has really been good for him, and I think it's going to lead to more consistent playing time. So yeah, I like him more than Clarkson at this point, even if Kobe plays.
Yeah. If you're looking on a little bit cheaper on the other side of that game, Emmanuel Mudiay gets a great matchup against the Lakers.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a safe play in all formats. I think there is, definitely an upside here against the Lakers team that really struggles against point guards that we've seen over the first 75% of the season. So he's definitely in play at that price, especially a little bit cheaper.
Right, and then you start getting a little lower, and you look at Shelvin Mack. He's not in a great matchup. Marcus Smart's not in a great matchup. But Patrick Beverley is pretty intriguing. at a reduced price tonight. I think he has some sneaky upside.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, he's averaging about 24 fantasy points over the last 4 games, and minutes have been a little bit inconsistent, but obviously the matchup against San Antonio, not a good one, but he's been pretty favorable in other matchups and coming off a decent game against Milwaukee. To touch on Jared Bayless, if he does start tonight, you're likely going to see 30-plus minutes, but I just don't see him getting a ton done against this Indy backcourt. It's not Houston. Houston's backcourt's awful, so I just don't see the upside from his last game there.
Right.
Moving over to shooting guard and looking at injuries, still Jimmy Butler out. Looking at Evan Fournier, who is doubtful for tonight's game with a sore wrist. We've seen Mario Hezonja start in his place. Not a guy I'm eyeing on tonight's slate with his floor. Kobe coming in questionable. Expected to play, but he was expected to play last night too.
Right.
So,
yeah, as we were just talking about, the narrative is more with the other guys sort of at the point guard position for DraftKings, and then Clarkson Russell. So, yeah, that's kind of what you're looking at there.
Yeah, with no Lou Williams tonight, he didn't travel with the team with a hamstring injury. It makes things a little bit easier. I just would really like that backcourt if Kobe sat just a lot more than I do already. So, I mean, they're in great spots.
Definitely.
As always, when James Harden's not playing the Spurs, he's a top option as shooting guard. I mean, he's a guy who's one of the few, if only, guys who can consistently put up over 50 fantasy points at this position. And you're always kind of getting a nice advantage when your shooting guard can get you 50 plus.
Yeah, I think Harden's vying for my number one overall spot tonight. I think he can put up a pretty solid number against this Pelicans team as long as they can keep it close. So I'm really liking him at his price. I mean, it's not crazy inflated right now, so I think that's a decent chance to hit value there.
Yeah, I mean, over 3 games against New Orleans this season, he's averaging 28, 9, and 6. So,
yeah,
I mean, it's pretty close to what he's been doing over the last few games anyway. 35, 5, and 5 over the last 4. So, Harden's consistent. You know you're going to get 50 plus from him. Hard to say that about a lot of these shooting guards, but there are some cheaper guys, Oladipo, Batum, that are kind of in play for me. I like the upside of both of them. But I think with Batum, you're kind of banking on Philly keeping it close, which it's not a big spread, but I'm going to treat it as one.
Yeah, and as we saw last night, Kemba doesn't pull punches when they're getting up by 15 or 20. So I think this is a game that you don't necessarily have to treat as a blowout, but you have to be aware that that's definitely a possibility, you know?
Yeah. Looking a little bit cheaper. Will Barton, I just think price considered, he's my favorite shooting guard of the night.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, great matchup, and he does have that high upside even in a regular matchup. He has that high upside. So at his price, the matchup, the Vegas, and everything surrounding him, I think this is a lot of positive indicators.
Yeah, I mean, 2 games against LA this season. He's played 29 minutes in each, 30 fantasy points. And I think with Gallinari out, you're looking for a little bit more upside to that, and I'm expecting a little bit more. Played 34 minutes last game, and I think you're going to see him handle all he can at small forward. So against the matchup against the Lakers, he's easily in play for me again tonight.
Right, definitely.
I'll look a little bit cheaper. There's some guys in this 5 to 5,500 range. Zach LaVine, JJ Redick, Evan Turner, Eric Gordon, Avery Bradley, all in good spots for me. I think Gordon has the higher upside, more of the risk. LaVine as well. I think I like those 2 plays in that range a little bit more than Redick and Bradley, but all 4 certainly in play.
Yeah, I do like LaVine for tournaments. I actually think he has quite a bit of upside in this game. And he's not really that much more expensive than the other players you mentioned. So yeah, that's definitely who I'm looking at there. But those are all pretty solid options. I mean, this Portland-Boston game is kind of an enigma right now, but I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of upside in that game.
Yeah. With those 4 guys being right there in that just above 5K range, I'm not going any lower. I don't see anyone viable for a punt option here. Gary Harris is still in that 5K range, seeing big minutes against the Lakers. Cash game guy, not a ton of upside. And I still think I'd rather just shoot for the upside in cash games anyway.
Right, and all those guys have relatively high floors as well, I believe. So I don't see the reason to go any cheaper than that.
Yeah. We'll go to small forward. I guess the big news is Rudy Gay questionable for tonight's game against Memphis, and we'll kind of talk about him a little bit more when we get to Cousins and what that means if he does sit tonight. Outside of that, not a lot of injuries to look at. Tony Allen's still questionable. We've seen Lance Stevenson kind of be the nice value play out of that situation, but his 20 to 23 fantasy points, I just don't think is going to cut it on tonight's slate. So I don't think punting is very wise.
No, I think you should stick with some higher upside guys than that.
Yeah. And speaking of that, Kevin Durant, he's my top option at small forward. I'll pay over 10K for him. I don't care. He's so consistent and just no big total. Anytime OKC has a big total, you know it's coming from Durant and Westbrook. There's no guessing games with those two. So averaging 50, 60K points over the last 5, put up 53 against the Clippers earlier this season. It's hard.
Consistently rebounding too, which is another thing to like, because obviously he's going to score, but once he adds that rebounding consistency element, I mean, this isn't a fluke, you know. So if he continues to rebound like this, it's going to be around 60 points a night. So I kind of view him in the same light as Westbrook tonight, except you're paying a lot less. So yeah, that's where I'm at with Durant.
At a weaker position.
Right.
Yeah.
Paul George, I like as well. I think he doesn't have quite that much upside, but I do think he has sort of 45, 50 point upside in this matchup.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we saw Milwaukee really struggle against pretty much all positions they have all season, but I like Paul George. He's averaged 25, 6, and 6 against Milwaukee in 2 games this season. I mean, he's a sizable guy who can handle their length, so I do like him. I think he's a pretty good discount from Durant there, and I don't think he's a bad play in all formats either. Just getting price considered.
Right. It's one where they're both good plays, so you can sort of build different lineups around each, and they kind of don't really. You can just build completely different lineups with both of them and be happy, you know.
Yeah. I mean, going a little bit cheaper, I think this is where it gets kind of tough. Giannis, Kawhi, Gordon Hayward, all not in great spots, and I don't think I'm going to be paying that price tag for them tonight.
I'm okay with Kawhi in cash. I think he's a decent bet to hit value, but again, that blowout concern is definitely there. And if he's leaving you with 30 to 35 points tonight, you're not going to be a happy camper. So probably better off just avoiding. Yeah, I mean, that whole sort of tier there is not something I'm really looking at tonight.
Yeah, I guess you make a pretty good point. If you're taking anyone out of those 3, it's going to be Kawhi, just with his consistency. I do think there is a little bit of blowout concern with San Antonio being at home to Detroit, but that's always been a concern with Kawhi this season. When he plays less than 30 minutes, it's not quite there. But if he does anything more, he's going to be a solid play.
Mm-hmm.
Look a little bit cheaper. Matt Barnes, a great option tonight. Still below 6K on both sides. He's been really consistent outside of that one Lakers stud that he put up, but he's averaging 11, 6, and 2 over the last 5 games. And he's a guy you can count on for minutes just because they're so battered down.
Right. There's probably going to only be 1 or 2 more nights of cheap Matt Barnes, which is like some of these guys that are coming up after the All-Star break are hilarious. But yeah, no, he's a good value again tonight. In a nice matchup, I think that's going to be a nice matchup for him. Yeah,
I like him a lot. And I mean, once again, you're kind of going a little bit lower to guys you don't really usually want to play, but The Bulls small forward situation with McDermott and Dunleavy there. They're both 20, 25 points guys. Because small forward's so weak, I don't mind going down to this level compared to the other positions where I'm getting that I can get that range for a little bit more. But him, McDermott, I don't mind. PJ Harrison against Sacramento's in play for me. 32, 24, and 30 minutes over the last 3 games there. A couple 25-point upside games there. So I don't mind him at pretty much a bare minimum price.
Yeah, and I guess one more guy would be Corey Brewer that I'm kind of looking at but not too excited about. He's kind of been playing minutes, but at the same time, I'm not really. He's someone to sort of check out for yourself, you know?
Looking at a big total like that, he's certainly in play if he can get those 20 to 25 minutes off the bench and be high usage. I think he's just a punt play, a nice swerve. Maybe you're hoping Harrison drops that dub, but at a similar price, I think Harrison's a little bit safer play with the minutes.
Right.
Power forward. So we're looking at DeMarcus Cousins now, and he seems to be the guy that no one's talking about tonight, who's a guy who does have 60-plus fantasy point upside. And when Rudy Gay has sat this season, and Rudy Gay is questionable tonight, 39% usage rate in those 8 games, averaging 31, 11, and 4.
Yeah.
He's coming off a 49% usage rate game. That's insane. Insane.
Yeah, I mean, when Rudy Gay's out, it's pretty much you have to play Boogie for the most part. And we were talking about this before the show, and I was like, wow, yeah, without Gay, you don't have to play him, but he's right up there with Harden and Durant for top option tonight.
And like the thing is, like he's a nice pivot from those guys because no one's talking about Boogie back-to-back 60 fantasy point outings. Maybe people will as the day goes on here if Gay news comes out that he is going to sit, but he dominates minutes and usage every night. And I mean, at this matchup with Memphis without Marcus Gasol ranking 24th in rebounding, I don't see any way that he goes below 50 in the night.
Right. If you want to play him tonight, you're kind of hoping that Rudy Gay news gets held off as long as it possibly can, and then last minute you can throw him in there. But yeah, no, that's definitely someone you could pivot off of and help you win a GPP.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at power forward on DraftKings, he's only 500 more than Davis. I easily rather take Cousins over Davis this season. It's just incredible. So FanDuel, it's a little different where he is a center. He's also, pretty much near 11K there as well. So it's a little different just because there's plenty of center options. But DraftKings, I think he's a really nice guy to build a GPP lineup around.
Right. Favors, I'm probably not touching tonight. Zach Randolph, I always want him to have more upside than he actually does. I'm probably not touching him either. Do you have any thoughts on them?
I think they're decent cash game options. I don't mind them. I think the prices come up a little bit. I think Favors definitely has a little bit more upside than Randolph does, but Randolph is in a better spot. I think they're in play. I mean, I don't find myself having too many shares of them tonight just because of their price, and my overall lineup construction is probably going to be focused more around value around the big guys tonight. So I think that's probably why I'm not playing them, because
I guess I'm just looking at sort of Aaron Gordon in that range, and I know he had a bad game last night, but I think that was more because of foul trouble and not really indicative of a normal Aaron Gordon game. So the peripheral stats were there. I think he was fine, sort of, in terms of how he played. So I look at him at having more upside and sort of even a relatively higher floor than Randolph. So that's kind of what I'm looking at there.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Gordon, he did have 5 fouls in 19 minutes. He put up 20 DK points in 19 minutes when he's usually been playing 30 to 35. So the fantasy points per minute were there as usual. He didn't have a bad game. He just got into that foul trouble, and he's been really consistent. So I'll definitely hop back on the Gordon train tonight. Looking at guys like Jabari Parker, Nerlens Noel, I think they're both tournament options just because of their upside. Noel's been a little bit inconsistent of late. The minutes haven't been there. It's been a little bit up and down, but his defensive game, his rebounding definitely gives him a pretty decent ceiling.
Yeah, definitely an intriguing ceiling, and I don't think he's going to be high owned tonight because of that slight blowout factor that we talked about earlier and his inconsistent play of late. So that's an interesting pivot, contrarian guy. Parker's coming off a pretty big game. I do think he brings some pretty decent upside at that price. And I also like Julius Randle in that range as well. Again, yep. I like the Lakers against that Nuggets team.
Yep, I'm definitely with you there. And one guy that kind of mentioned, I think, because Anthony Davis was more on the probable side tonight, still Ryan Anderson. Still price cheap, big total, going to be needed to come off and be a scorer off the bench. I mean, he's averaged about 30 minutes in 3 games against Houston this season, gone for 32 points on average. At that price tag, it's pretty intriguing to me. Just trying to get exposure to a game on a cheaper side, going to be low owned because Davis is likely to be back.
Yeah, and that's the type of game flow you're looking at for Ryan Anderson. So that's definitely an intriguing matchup, and obviously he has that big upside for sort of a bench player.
Yep. Looking at cheaper, I think the value guy of the night's likely going to go to Bobby Portis, especially if Taj Gibson sits, which he pulled a handy last night on the back-to-back. Hard to see him coming back tonight, but I don't know the extent of the injury. That's game starts at 7, so it's kind of nice. We'll be able to get that news beforehand. But Bobby Portis averaging about 25 fantasy points over the last 5 games, right around 25 minutes. If he can get up into the near 30s, his fantasy points per minute are solid this season, where I really like him in all formats.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, especially if Gibson sits, that's a really nice matchup.
Yep. I guess there's one guy that's power forward's probably the likely spot I'll maybe take a shot lower, and Ed Davis. I think going to be glossed over, but averaging 25 points in the last 6 games, shooting 70% from the field, about 8 and 8. That's what you're going to get from him on most nights, with hopefully a couple defensive stats. But I mean, over 25 points in the last 5 games, and a matchup against Boston, a high total. And the easier matchup it would be to attack the bigs of Boston, and Portland just doesn't have that capability. So maybe we'll see that tonight.
Absolutely. And again, like we talked about, when the implied odds look a little fishy, it might mean some of these secondary pieces sort of have higher upside than they normally would. So that's definitely a good guy to look at.
Yep, I'm definitely with you there. Moving over to center tonight, and the only real injury news, I guess you could say, is Jahlil Okafor, who was kind of surprised sit last game, expected to play tonight. So Jeremy Grant would be pushed back to the bench, who would have been another solid fill-in for tonight's game, but likely not the case. So we're really looking at a pretty stacked position of centers tonight. And you were looking at Towns being your guy tonight.
Yeah, I'm just looking at that matchup with him and Gortat. It just seems like, especially if Dang sits, it seems like he's going to get a ton of usage. He can sort of step out and hit jumpers and sort of move around. He's really athletic, and Gortat's got a little bit of a stiffer game. So I think he could win that matchup, at least offensively. I actually do think Gortat will hold his own, sort of getting the rebounds and stuff like that he normally does. But I do like Towns to sort of win in terms of fantasy points. So I think I actually like him a little more than Gasol tonight.
Yeah, I think if looking at a 220 total, Minnesota 108, Washington 111, it's going to be, the centers are definitely going to have some upside just because of who are the other scorers on those teams outside of, Wiggins and who's a direct scorer. It's not Rubio. He's not a scoring guy. You're looking at Washington. It's Wall. You got guys like Porter and Beal who can chip in, but Gortat is also expected to be a big part of the offense. So I definitely like those 2 guys tonight. And heading toward that Orlando and Chicago game, both are in good spots. But, Gasol in the back-to-back, Vooch main there, been playing really solid. I like Vooch in cash games.
Mm-hmm. I actually think Vooch is the safest play of the night, even over Towns. I just think Towns is a little more upside.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, Towns could also have a lower floor than Vooch tonight, so I think I'm just taking it safe with him in cash games. I also like Dwight Howard. been uber consistent of late, averaging 18 and 14 over the last 4 games, and been really solid since the break. And a matchup against New Orleans, we've been picking on them with centers all season. So he's another guy, great play in all formats, and another high-scoring game to target.
Right, and I think you might want to mix all these guys in on FanDuel and then maybe combo them again like you did with Whiteside and Brook Lopez last night, or whoever you combine them with. But yeah, I think this is another night that's a viable option.
Yep. One guy I think I'm fading tonight, and that's DeAndre Jordan, just across the board, who's in that range and who's been good. But, I mean, in that price range, it's not a great matchup for him. Yeah, it's high scoring, but I don't see him being his usual dominant self in this game.
Yeah, and again, with Howard right there on DraftKings, and it's just – and right there on FanDuel as well, it's kind of like, why take that unnecessary risk for the same type of guy?
Yeah, and I think, paying it down, there are some intriguing options. I like Rudy Gobert, even though he's a little bit inconsistent at times. I like the matchup. He's coming off back-to-back double-doubles against easier opponents, but he's a big block shot upside guy, and Toronto's allowed nearly 3 blocks per game to opposing centers this season, so I could definitely see Gobert bumping it up with that upside of maybe going 5 or 6 block shots.
Yeah, and again, that's real upside for Gobert. He is that type of defender. So intriguing matchup for him. I mean, they haven't really been playing Valanciunas all that much, and I just think Gobert's in a good spot.
Yeah, I like him. I think he's, for price considered, Toronto's led the 9th most fantasy points per game to opposing centers in the last 10 games. So, as you mentioned, the Valanciunas hasn't been in there that much. They've been struggling a little bit down low. I think Gobert's kind of a sneaky play, and if he can get that double-double with that points is always the hardest thing for him to come by, but if he can get that double-digit 5 block game, he'll be really solid for that price.
Right. If he hits the ceiling tonight, you're looking at like 11 points, 12 rebounds, and then that 4 or 5 block upside that you were talking about.
Yeah. Looking a little bit cheaper. I think this is about as cheap as I'm going in. 2 guys. Jared Saunders, a power forward on FanDuel, center on DK. Sully's been playing really well of late. I mean, really well. And he doesn't play, over 30 minutes a game, but he's playing right about 27, 28. Averaging 12 and 9 and 3, about 33 fantasy points per game. Great matchup against Portland, who have struggled against opposing centers. A sneaky value play tonight.
Yeah, and a sneaky value play, and he does have that 40 to 45 point fantasy upside. So it's not like you're just taking a cash game guy either. I do think he has a little tournament upside in him as well. So yeah, interesting play at 6K. If you're looking to pay down, I think you're looking at him against a weaker Portland front court there.
Yeah. Sullinger's, he definitely does have that upside. We've seen it in the past, and his fantasy points per minute can kind of rival this next guy, and Nikola Jokic, who has a big fantasy points per minute, but the minutes aren't always there. I mean, I find it odd. He's averaging 11, 9, and 3, which is about 30 fantasy points per game in the last 5, but averaging 21 minutes. It's insane. And that's just because he 19 minutes, 11, 26, 20, and 30 over the last 5 games.
Yeah.
You can never count on the minutes to be there for him.
He is insanely productive per minute. And I mean, against this Lakers team, I just love this game tonight. I think he's just in a great matchup. He's going to have that low floor, which you understand when you're putting in your lineups. But yeah, he has great upside, especially for his price.
Yeah, and looking at the Lakers, they're 27th in rebounding, about the 4th most fantasy points per game. If he can get some minutes, I'd feel a little bit safer with Kenneth Faried's set. That would kind of there's one less guy for him to just move in and out of that front court. So it's I like Jokic a lot tonight.
Right. In a perfect world, Kobe sits, Faried sits, and then I'm probably just going all in on that game.
If in a perfect world, which we never get in the NBA.
Last minute, they're both starting. But
keep an eye on those. Definitely keep an eye on injuries, because there's going to be a lot of value that could possibly open up, and upside gets a little bit more heightened when these guys sit. So definitely keep an eye on that for today's slate because you're going to need it pairing them up with some of the big names out there. That's going to wrap things up here with us at the Minutes to Win It podcast. Check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all our great tools and content.